Hola, my little YouTubers. Today we're going to look at three words, well, three terms, really. The first one is two words. It's Holy Land. It ties in with the Crusades that we talked about in our last video. The second two words are going to relate directly to one another, and they're related to Islam. And the first one is Ulama, and the second one is Sufi. And so these two terms are two different types, two very different types of Muslims, both very important to the Muslim world. So we might get a visit from Bruce. He's looking at me very interested. So we'll see. So first, let's talk about the Holy Land. The Holy Land was the area around Israel, Palestine, that was being fought over in the Crusades. The Holy Land, yes, we do. We get to see Bruce. The Holy Land was also important to a few different religions. And so if we look at its geopolitical positioning, it's important to Jews because it's kind of the original place of Hebrews, and the Hebrew peoples have always been closely linked to this area in Hebrew history. Therefore, the history of the Jews is very much tied to this Holy Land. Christianity also considers this area holy, the area around Palestine, because that's where Jesus lived and preached and taught and actually walked the earth. So and where he died, and so it's considered to be holy territory for Christians as well. That's why they wanted to get over there in the Crusades and reclaim Jerusalem for the Christendom, which is a term given to the entire Christian community. And thirdly, it's a holy place for Muslims. It's near the Middle East. It's in the area where Islam was revealed, and it's the seat of government for the early caliphs. So the Umayyad and the Abbasids had both had their caliphate, their capitals stationed here. And it's geopolitically, again, this means geographically and politically, a very important location because it's kind of at that crossroads of Afro-Eurasia, which is what makes the Middle East such a hot spot for religious and political activity. So that's the Holy Land. Now the next two words are Ulama and Sufis. So Ulama are the community of Muslim scholars who are kind of the ones who argue over and interpret the Quran, which is the book, the holy text revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and also the hadiths. And the hadiths are the sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So things that weren't in the Quran, but that he taught during his life that people wrote down. And so these together kind of make up what is pure Islam. And so Ulama are these scholars who are devoted to reading and interpreting these texts and developing what's also called Sharia, which is Islamic law. So pure Islamic law. Ulama tend to be very orthodox and strict about doctrine, which means there's no wiggle room in Islam, according to the Ulama. It is how they interpret it and how it's been put out in the original documents. They tend to be extremely conservative. Someone might call this strict. They would call it real or true. And so they are important for preserving kind of the purity of the Islamic religion. Now the second word is kind of the opposite of Ulama, and it's Sufi. Sufis are Muslims who embrace more of the mystical side of Islam. That relationship with God is very special, and that worship should be special as well. And so unlike the Ulama, who are kind of strict and interpreting and by the book of what the original documents say, Sufis are much more open to I don't want to say experimentation, but kind of like doing things differently. Anything you can do in order to have a closer relationship with God. Whether that means dancing and singing, or in some cases it meant doing some mind-altering substances. But the Sufis were open to different religious practices. This is important because the Sufis were able to make contacts with non-Muslims. And, okay, that's interesting. The Sufis were able to make contact with non-Muslims and really kind of speak their language and take into account their original worship practices. And these non-Muslims then said, hey, these Sufis are pretty cool, and maybe Islam is pretty cool, and we could practice it our way as well. So it led to kind of syncretism of earlier religions and then Islam. So a lot of the Sufis were instrumental in spreading Islam to new believers. Think about it as like, I like to think about it in terms of the two Cars characters, Sarge, who's very strict by the book, and this is what it is, and then Fillmore, the VW bus, who's kind of like, hey man, whatever, we can do it, and they're best friends, they're buddies, but they do things very differently. So there you go. Don't forget to be awesome. Hope you're keeping up in your work, and don't stress out too much, and yep, just continue being awesome. Bye.